Okay. So can ESG give your organization a competitive edge? And that's what I want to talk about and how. And we'll explore a little bit about what AI brings to that picture, or does AI bring anything? What when we say AI, of course, AI is a broad term. It's an umbrella term, and you hear me say that in our sessions on NLP workshop that Sam and I are conducting together. And I do invite you to take a look and see those sessions and reach out to us if you have any questions. But the two are very interrelated, and that's why I chose to take this approach of running ESG and the NLP workshop series in parallel, right? Which Sam and I are doing together. Um, when we talk about artificial intelligence and how we can leverage that for giving us the value that of unlocking the value that ESG can provide, with a couple of things, to kind of throw into the conversation and into the perspective, because those are really interrelated and also very important. One is, in the beginning, I was talking about there's a plethora and a troves of data that is available, right? But in order to provide value from that data, um, we have to make sure that we have certain parameters in place, right? And also realize that this data may exist internally in an organization, and that's what we have on the screen here. Good data. Is it good data? And this internal data could be structured or unstructured. And that's how the challenge also emerges, as you may realize, right? There is a lot of data. If it's structured and unstructured, what is it? But in addition to internal data, there can be external sources of data today as well, such as, I'm just giving IoT as an example, but there is information coming in from sensors, there's information coming in from social media. There's a lot of information and data that exists for an organization, which may not reside within the organization. And again, challenges that you will that do arise with that, something of that, as the scope increases and the touch points increase, is what how do you differentiate or determine what is good data, what is bad data, and what is harmful data, as well as how do you validate that these are all the right sources that you're looking for. And then, last but not least, in that beehive of trust of the crux of the problem here, or the landscape, is the trust. How do you establish trust in the data that you are reporting on? Do you want to report on everything that you are, right? So what is that kind of data? And that transparency, of course, is a pivotal part of what AI can provide. And that transparency is achievable to the right extent and right degree if it is you preserving privacy data of that data, as well as making sure that it is secure. And by secure, I have emphasized if there is integrity of the data, right? Because as we know, garbage in is garbage out, right? We have to make sure that as we are looking at a large amount of data, or even what can play a critical role in the impact of the organization's trajectory, roadmap, reputation, and even mission and a core mission, for example, and a mission statement. It has to be aligned. And how do you do that? It has to be good data, it has to be validated and transparent and secure in terms of security, as I mentioned, really focusing more on the integrity aspect of it. Now, how can you use AI and what form of AI, which aspect of AI? I started out saying, telling you that AI is not an umbrella term, right? There are many different types of technologies that make up AI, which is essentially software, right? It's a system. The two that are going to be the most important here are going to be, sorry, NLP, which stands for natural language processing, and holds immense value and immense scope and immense promise for getting value out of that data. And also the other is machine learning. So those are the two areas of AI that one would kind of really have to utilize for getting the value out of ESG. I am actually going to stop here. I have spoken. I do give frequent presentations, so I skipped through my personal introduction, but I'm just going to focus on one thing here, which is, in addition to my focus on technology and governance and operationalizing that governance. I just want to point out that if we're talking about two very complex areas such as ESG and as AI, and then in part of AI that we're focusing on for getting that value from ESG and providing that value for an organization, and what investors would be looking for and should be looking for is, do you have trust in that AI, in that NLP, and how do you establish that trust, right? What are the elements that will make it trustworthy? And by that, I would like to invite you to take a look at a model I've published for establishing trust in AI. It's called AI Tips, and it really stands for transparency, integrity, privacy, and security of creating any AI implementation. Okay? And how do you do that? How do you prepare, whether it's a threat model or understanding the risk going in? Because unless there is a data lineage, unless there is a transparency of what is the data that is being used and how is it being used and how is it being created into, whether it's intents, as Sam talks about in natural language processing, or are you understanding the right intention in a language such as English? You can it can be very, very impactful, correct? Where something like a comma can change meaning of a sentence, right? So it has to be done in a kind of a well thought out process and a secure process. By secure, I mean a trusted process for establishing that the way to get the data that ESG or whatever the objectives are, everything has to be aligned when it comes to the business. I am not going to spend too much time on this. I really wanted this to be a very focused and focused on ESG and what is the value that NLP and AI can provide. I mentioned that Sam and I are offering a class and a workshop on one approach of building natural language processing model. In this case, it was for chatbot, but if you're talking about ESG and you're talking about, for example, how would you use a natural language generation and natural language processing for one of the areas that you'll be looking at, for example, would be sentiment analysis, for example. You're doing sentiment analysis on a CEO earnings call, for example. Extremely important to know where and how to build in that trust into that natural language generation and processing, for example, for ESG purposes. So what you can expect is in the next session, we'll go a little bit more into depth into talking about how to unlock ESG values with AI and where the complexity. I'd like to thank you and stop right there. I don't know, Sam, if there are any questions or.
Not at the moment, Pam. We don't have any questions. I've just made a couple of, obviously just posted a couple of the comments you made around the TIPS model and the importance of data security and transparency. But we don't have any questions right now. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I am I'm stopping the recording and give me a second. Let's do that.
Thank you. Thanks, Pam. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Sam. I'm back now. Okay, let me stop recording on the here also. Are you sure?